Happy holidays, everyone, and welcome back to our series, Learning How to Not Suck at Blitz Chess, where we analyze our chess games and learn how to play this game that basically no one's good at, unless your name is Stockfish. In the last game, we played a queen's pawn opening as white, if you remember, and we played against a Benoni, a bit of an advanced structure, and we did wind up losing that game, but we did learn a lot. I'm playing black, and our opponent is starting with e4. Traditionally against e4, especially in rapid games, I'll play e6. Usually I like to play the French defense. Sometimes I will play e6, b6. I have rarely been known to play the Caro-Kann every once in a while, but more recently, especially in Blitz, I've been playing a lot of Sicilian defense, learning a little bit more about the Dragon, the Najdorf, the Kann Sicilian, some different variations within the Sicilian, and a lot of times I will play against the open Sicilian with knight f3. But interestingly, in this game, my opponent decides to just start off with d4. d4 is very interesting because after takes, you have to recapture with the queen as white, and black gets some very nice and quick development with knight c6. Interestingly, the best move here is actually knight f6, which I would never think to play because of e5. But what's cool is this is actually bad for white because now you can play knight c6, kicking out the queen. If the queen moves somewhere that doesn't defend the pawn, obviously you can just win the pawn. The queen doesn't want to go here because then you just get knight g4 and you're going to win the pawn anyways. So really the only place that the queen can go that's actually any good is going to be queen c3. But now you actually have the move e6, and this is just a fascinating idea. The knight is hanging, but white cannot take it or they lose their queen. So already just in the opening, this is something really cool that I'm just learning these new ideas that I want to kind of incorporate because black just gets very good development in this position and it's very nice. The best move here for white is actually this, but now we can actually do something like hopping into the center, attacking the queen, and black just gets a very nice position here. This pawn's very loose unless they want to move their f pawn from in front of their king. So this just looks very nice for black here. Either way, what we actually played in the game was knight c6, kicking their queen out, and then g6. And we go for somewhat of a Dragon Sicilian setup. We could have also played a move like e6 here to open up our bishop this way, or even just knight f6 right away, or any number of different things like that. But we decided to play this because this is what I'm most comfortable with. Opponent brings the bishop out, which is not too uncommon. I see this a lot. Bishop g7, lining our bishop up along this long diagonal. They, of course, cannot move this bishop out because otherwise we will win the pawn and trap their rook. So white just needs to account for that when they develop. And they decide to take. Taking is not necessarily the best here in the Sicilian because you are losing a bishop for a knight. And obviously at a very high level, it's better to have the bishop in the long game than the knight. And usually when white plays against the Sicilian like this, a lot of times they play in a way where they don't play an open Sicilian, and something like this happens where white plays bishop b5 here, obviously a different opening, which is the Rossalimo, and usually white is able to, for example, ruin black's pawn structure, something like this. And the benefit you get from trading off the bishop for the knight is damaging the structure. But in the opening that we wound up playing, white does not get that. So white trades off their bishop, but doesn't actually damage my structure, and now this is just slightly better for black. And particularly with the way my opponent is playing this game, they give us a very early opportunity to play the move d5. And usually, if you can achieve this move in the Sicilian and get a bunch of pawns in the center, you're doing very well for yourself. And d5 here is actually very good. I obviously don't play d5, I'm not as familiar with these positions and how to punish based on my opponent's playing, but if I play d5 and they, for example, just take this pawn, this is actually very good for us because now c takes, and we can actually even take the full center here. We're also threatening a fork, and so on and so forth. If they decide not to take and let's say push, now we're just winning material here. It's also very good for us. So they cannot ignore this pawn. If they take the pawn, it's bad. It's kind of just bad no matter what they do here. But we're playing Blitz. I've only actually spent 5 seconds on this opening so far, and you can tell my opponent has 2 because we're just kind of playing normal developing moves. I'm not playing anything wrong, I'm just not taking advantage of what my opponent is doing incorrectly and just doing some normal development, which is also totally fine. But my position is still better, and I'm not letting them take initiative at any point at all. I'm not giving up advantage in favor of white, and so far, if anything, the only person that's been playing for an advantage at this point in the game is myself. We make a few more developing moves. I decide to commit to d6, which allows my bishop to come out potentially either one of these directions. d6 is pretty common to play in something more like a Najdorf or a Dragendorf setup. You can also allow your bishop to come out this way. We have some more developing moves. White's going to castle, black's going to castle as well. And then rook d1. I don't want my queen to be aligned with their rook. Queen c7 is a very common move in the Sicilian. A lot of times you want to be on one of these files, as these are the ones that are going to open up and where black can kind of launch a counterattack. We still do have our c pawn, so we can't have anything on the c file yet, but we definitely already have some prospects on this file that can attack. We could play a5, we could bring our bishop out this way, we can bring our bishop this way. We have a lot of flexibility in this position. e5 is a mistake, and as you can see, both players still are not spending a lot of time yet. I have the very clear move. You can see this pretty easily if you're playing a slower time control. Knight g4, which just forks the queen and the pawn, and we just pick up a clean pawn here. I didn't see that though, because we're playing blitz and I'm trying to play the opening pretty quickly, so I just take. This is a pretty common idea, knight g4 in Sicilian. It's an idea I don't actually play enough, and it's not just in this position, but a lot of the time, especially when white moves his pawn forward, and something I should start considering. And if you're a Sicilian player, always be aware of this knight here. Even if there was like something monitoring this square, the bishop does cover the knight there too. It can also threaten things like mate long term. Anyway, I just give up the pawn, and because we're playing blitz, again, I don't really know if a queen trade is advantageous. It doesn't look bad to me because takes, their knight's a little loose in the center. I might get a little bit of tempo here. So takes, and bishop b7, defending my loose pawn in the center. They decide to move the bishop to attack my knight. Again, this does not scare me at all. I'm totally happy if they want to take this knight. The knight's not pinned against anything. This isn't really actually threatening anything in my position, and I'm not super scared of it. I bring my rook to the open file. If they take, also it's bad for me. So if they take this, it's bad because now I have the bishop pair against their two knights, which is way better. If they take this, it's bad for them because then I move my other rook to the open file. So I'm just holding the tension here. I don't need to move my knight anywhere. My knight's very happy where it is. My bishop doesn't need to move anywhere. My rook is happy here. They're not going to want to take me. Eventually, I might go here and threaten to double. I might play the move a5 in the future to take some space. I might start moving this pawn forward to open up this bishop. So we have a few different ideas here, but my opponent takes. And I'm like, what? Now I just have the bishop pair. Not only do I have the bishop pair, but my plan here is now to force this knight to move out of the way and then capture this knight and double their pawns, which is exactly what I do. I go, okay, I have 224. I have plenty of time on the clock. We can play this endgame where I'm just going to be at an advantage because, according to what I'm thinking, I have a majority on this side, and these two pawns aren't really two pawns. It's almost like they have one pawn there. This is pretty much equivalent to this. And even if we simplify where, like, let's say this pawn trades for this, or maybe ideally this pawn trades for these two pawns, my bishop will be better by itself against this singular knight in the long run because the bishop can play on both sides of the board. So in every endgame, I'm better. They can't take me here because then I'm going to get the open file. I can maybe threaten to double at some point soon. They could also probably try to threaten to double. Let's see what they're going to do here. And actually, it's my turn to move first. So I decide to play rook c8. One of the reasons I did this because I was predicting they would play knight a5. Knight a5 attacks both the pawn and the bishop. I do not want to trade my bishop for their knight. That would probably be better for them because I think my bishop is going to be stronger than their knight long term. And I want to be able to tuck my bishop away in this corner on this very long diagonal, at least for right now. It can open up at any point I want it to. The rooks will always defend it back here, and I feel very happy with this kind of idea. Now here my opponent plays something that I wasn't necessarily expecting. Again, I mentioned whoever controls one of the open files probably has a little bit more of a favorable position, and they decide to take my rook. Takes, and now I have the file, and they cannot contest for it. Sure, I guess they can go here and try to come in this file, but can they? I control this square, I control this square, I control this square, and technically for at least right now, I control this square. I want to be able to go into my opponent's position. So they can't really get in right now. But if I ever do move the rook, they can get in. Now, mind you, they didn't even play the move rook b1. They just played h3, which is interesting. So I play one of the top engine moves here. I play f5. f5 I thought was a very strong move because it allows my king to get activity a lot faster. We're taking space, and we're going to get our king very active into the game very quickly. And now actually they do play rook b1. And the idea is I cannot move my rook here. That's just losing. Why is it losing? Well, they're just going to win my bishop. So I can't actually go for this too quickly. Instead, first I need to play king f7. That was the whole idea of f5. Obviously, we're taking space, but we're also getting our king into the game off the back rank. The king is going to protect this pawn and prevent any shenanigans from my opponent's rook. And now that that's opened up for me, again, opponent just wasting time here. I don't really know what my opponent's game plan possibly is. Okay, they could try to maybe reroute their knight somewhere else if they really want to, but I don't know if that really accomplishes anything. The rook right now for them is on the best possible file it could be on, so they don't really know what to do. they're just playing rook b4. I do have less time on the clock. I have to be a little bit cautious and try to make sure I don't lose as a lack of time. So I'm going to go for it. Now, my idea is to play rook d2, but I decided to play this move first, which is actually a very good move. I don't even remember why I played it, but I actually start with the move c5. I start with the move c5 because I think it does two things. First of all, it forces them to move their rook a second time. Clearly, they wanted the rook here for some reason. I don't really know why, but they move their rook here. I play this to force them to move the rook again, and it also opens up my bishop along this nice diagonal for the future. They go rook c4, and now is where I do mess up a little bit. I needed to go for one of these two moves. Rook d2, rook d1. I wind up playing rook c8, which is way too passive. And this is the issue I actually have in a lot of my games. This is way too passive because now they're going to target this pawn again, and they're still going to win this pawn anyways. I just need to give this pawn up and go for some initiative here. Now, rook d2 is a decent move. So once they take this pawn, I will then take this pawn and continue to apply pressure on both of these pawns as well. I'm pretty happy here actually after takes because my rook is just very all up in their position, being extremely annoying. The even better move, which would have maintained this very nice evaluation, is checking the king first. And this almost looks like a useless check because the follow-up move is now rook d2. But what is the difference here? The difference is now the king does not cover this f2 pawn. So either they can continue with their game plan and take this pawn, but now I take this pawn and threaten taking on g2, which is just an insanely strong threat that they cannot deal with. Or they have to waste a whole move moving their king back to take the pawn, and now I get a tempo here. Now I get to take their pawn first before they take my pawn, and then I can continue gobbling and capture another pawn. So in a faster time control like Blitz, I don't have enough time to calculate that. Usually I'm always trying to think, is a check I'm going to give useful? One of the issues that beginners have is they check too frequently. When there's a check available, they just take it. And personally, I didn't really see the benefit of giving this check at a glance. Like, I didn't see this whole idea of checking and then coming back. So if I was to play a move other than rook c8, I probably would have just played rook d2. But looking back on this is a very refined idea with a lot of depth to it that I definitely should have looked into a little bit more. And it would have given me this monstrous, obviously, +2 advantage if I found that idea. Instead, we play a little more passively, and I lose this pawn. Now, I do get something in return for it. So I do lose this pawn, unfortunately. I decided to trade rooks and win the A pawn back, which I'm pretty happy with. It wasn't what I wanted to get, but I think it still worked because, again, these two pawns are basically just one pawn, and it's a pawn that my bishop completely negates the effectiveness of. The A pawn will march in every endgame. It's a pass pawn that white will constantly have to monitor with either their knight or their king. And while they have to monitor this pawn, I'm also going to start making progress on the king side. I have a minute and a half on the clock to win this game, and it is a completely winning position for black if I can just figure it out and not blunder anything. Now, I should also mention at this point in the video that I'm not actually on desktop when I'm playing this game. This was a game I played on mobile, and what you'll notice is none of my moves were pre-moved. This is move 26. This game goes to move 70. So let's see how I play the next 50 moves with a minute and a half on the clock. Opponent plays f4. Very nice move, allows them to get their king into the game faster and is a little bit restricting towards my king. I think this move is very good. It's also probably one of the top engine moves. I go for their weak c2 pawn. It looks like they cannot defend it at all. I'm just going to try to pick up a pawn here. Opponent plays knight d7. I immediately go to attack the knight. And now they go knight here. Knight's attacking me, and it's going to pick up my h7 pawn. A little scary. I can't really go back towards it. I have to justify my king coming outwards. Also, if I go back towards it, they have takes and then check again. So it's going to be a little annoying. So I feel like I need to justify this by moving my king up the board. Not only that, but once I do that, by the way, king d5, top engine move, their knight is very far away from this pawn, which I can probably, now I'm starting to think about it, just start marching. This king's never going to make it over there. The knight's never going to get over here. I'm going to start by picking up this pawn. It goes back. They're spending a lot of time on these pawns. They're taking their time. They're just trying to gobble all these pawns up. I move my king a little closer to the edge of the board. I am just now completely abandoning ship over here. I want nothing to do with these pawns. The engine loves this. The engine loves sacking the whole house because I just have this A pawn that's going to promote. But I need to start pushing it. I need to start using the A pawn. E6 is a bit in the wrong direction because I need to get this pawn going. But my opponent misses their opportunity here. They need to play knight e5 check to have enough time to get close enough to be able to stop my pawn. But they don't do that. They're getting gluttonous, trying to gobble all the pawns over here. And now I take the c3 pawn. I am putting all of my eggs into this pawn. And I'm still kind of scared. I mean, the engine says this is fine, but I'm still kind of scared now. If they play this, then like the engine says it's fine, but I'm very nervous here because this knight maybe is able to get back in time. I'm not able to calculate this all with such a low on time on the clock. I have a minute left on the clock. We go here. Opponent does wind up taking, but now I have a5. And if my opponent tries to come here to stop my pawn, I can just move my king closer to it. The bishop covers all of the knight's forward momentum along these light squares, so the knight cannot get in at all. We're just marching our pawn up the board. They move their king up, but the game's over. I mean, the game's over. They can't win the pawn. Look at this. Like I said, the bishop just cuts off all of the knight's squares. We are completely restricting their knight. It cannot move forward. So my opponent's just trying to march their pawn up now. I'm surprised they didn't do this a little bit earlier, honestly, with h4, h5, h6. And thankfully, my bishop is very fast. I mean, even now it can cut off this pawn, obviously. But we're just going for it. And we're going to make a queen. And we have 53 seconds on the clock. The position is plus 72, but I'm on mobile and I need to play fast. h5, mate in the evaluation. Mate in 7, check, check. Okay, we're bringing our queen in, check. Mate in 13. Okay, mate in 12, check. All right, we're just checking them. We're giving a bunch of checks. I gotta start winning their pawns. So we're gonna take the G pawn. Okay, now we're gonna come in here. We're gonna go over here. We're gonna try to win these other pawns. We're gonna come down here. We're just harassing the king. We're being as annoying as possible. The knight comes in. We have another check here, another check here. We're gonna bring our king in. No 3-move repetition. Okay, now we gobble the H pawn. Nice. We basically ran our opponent out of moves. They had no moves here. Neither of these pawns can move forward. If they move the knight here or here, and we will just take it. Same with here. They probably could have moved the knight here. There may have been a way I could have navigated my queen somewhere to try to win it, but they go king here. And remember, they still only have a minute left on the clock too, so we have less time than they do, but they only have a minute. We have 22 seconds. And notice all of our last 10 moves, we spend a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, a second, 3 seconds. This one took 10 seconds for no reason. I spent way too much time on this, but it's also because I'm on mobile. Desktop, I can easy win this in 10 to 15 seconds. I make a bunch of pre-moves because a lot of times you know where their king is going to go or you can kind of approximate. I actually don't think I have pre-moves turned on mobile, but either way, we check here. Okay, bring our king a little closer. You get our king involved. Okay, we take the pawn. King gets a little closer. The king defends the F pawn, but then I check it. I go here. I probably need to take this pawn. I need to take this pawn so I can make progress here. Where you check. Okay, check. Okay, Kim finally takes the pawn. We have 12 seconds to mate our opponent. We are completely dominating. Check. King slides over, and now I'm going to start marching the second pawn. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to checkmate them. I go here. I sacrifice my queen because I know I'm going to make another pawn. I have 7 seconds, and I'm moving my pawn as fast as possible. That was 0.1 seconds. 0.1 seconds. I even sacrificed the bishop. I have a queen and a king. And again, if I'm on computer here with 6 seconds, this is the easiest mate ever. I have a guaranteed checkmate. But look at them too. They're actually spending a few seconds between each move to mess with me. They spend 3 seconds on that move, and I go here. They spend another second on this move, and I spend a full second just going here. And they're also taking their time. They spend 3 seconds on this one. They're just trying to flag me, and I go down. And with 0.2 seconds on the clock, it's a draw by time versus insufficient material. But we learned a lot from this game. My opening preparation was significantly better than my opponent's. We already learned a little bit about the opening position and how this is already very good for black. I can take advantage of being in the center right here. I can take advantage of bringing my knight to g4 here. There's a lot of different things we learned from this one that I'm pretty happy with. I felt like my game plan in this one was very good with having the bishops versus the knights. I feel like my opponent was very trade happy and wasn't taking into account who the trades benefited. And this is something very good for you beginner players to know. When you are trading a piece for a piece of equal material, just even like this trade right here, a bishop and a knight are technically equal for the most part. Even when you're making equal trade, you have to think about who's benefiting from this trade. So this bishop long term is going to be way better than this knight as far as how the game is currently looking to progress. And by giving up both of your bishops, you are giving up a huge amount of equity by giving your opponent the bishop pair. And you're not even giving it to me by damaging my structure. My structure is still fully intact. If you were, say, getting a knight plus a pawn, or even a knight plus a doubling of the pawns, that's usually worth the bishop in certain situations. You notice here, I made an equal exchange, but I got something out of it. I split my opponent's structure here, which was worth the exchange for me. And I still have a bishop left here, and my structure is just a little bit better. Again, these kind of equate to this equates to this, and then I basically have +1 on this side of the board. So I already feel like I'm at a bit of an advantage here, and my opponent's just very trade happy. Again, they just took the rook. There's no reason for them to take the rook here. Now my rook is just way better. My rook is just dominating this file. We need to be a little more aggressive. We need to be okay giving up some material sometimes to take the initiative in the game like this. And getting into my opponent's position is more valuable than this pawn right here. I learned from that later in this game, actually right away, when I gave up my king side to progress the a pawn. My whole idea here was to push this pawn up. And I should have actually just started doing it already. I should have, after they took this, I should have just started marching this pawn up. Should have just played a5 here. There's no reason for me to take this pawn and come here and take this and do all that. I should have just gone boop, bing, bang, bong, boom. And then made a queen. Once I made the queen, when this position was already completely winning, I made the queen, and it was just all about having enough time to checkmate. If you enjoyed this video, there will be another similar video coming out next week that you can also check out. Consider subscribing if you learned something from this. And throughout the entire month of January, we will be hosting the Pog Legends Streamer Chess Tournament, which is very similar to Pog Champs. That will be happening live on my Twitch channel all throughout that month. 24 streamers will be competing for prizes, clout, and glory, all between the ratings of like 200 to 600. It's going to be chaotic, fun, hilarious. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. Consider following us over there for some live chess content, and I hope to see you in the next video. Happy holidays. Have a great day, everyone.